Well, it's great to be here with everyone. Yeah, like Matt said, my name is Gabe Coyle, and I am the campus pastor who leads Christ Community's downtown campus, and also the co-city director alongside of Delano Sheffield. And it's a joy to be here, and very honored to be up here with two friends of mine who, man, are just doing some amazing work in this city. Yeah, Jarrett and Jeanette, also I call her JT as well. And so would you just begin, both of you, with telling us a little bit about where you serve?
Sure, yeah, my name's Jarrett Meek, and I serve in Kansas City, Kansas, near Central Avenue and 18th Street, in a heavily immigrant and refugee community. And we started Mission Adelante about 12 years ago, and we are seeing community transformation happen right under our noses.
Yeah, and I'll start with a mention that I had the privilege of serving on the pastoral team at Christ Community for a little over a decade, and this past November transitioned to join the team at Hope International, which is a Christ-centered microfinance organization. Through a network of savings and microfinance institutions, we help provide access to capital to the most underserved communities in the globe.
Well, excellent. Now that we got a little bit of context here, Jarrett, we're going to start with you. And Mission Adelante, you're focused in on a very specific neighborhood. So maybe to expand that context a little bit more, can you tell us how you've seen the neighborhood in which you live and serve, how it's changed over the past 10 years, some of its demographics, new business, those sorts of things?
Yeah, we moved into our neighborhood after having been missionaries in Bolivia about 12 years ago. And really the seed to the beginning of Mission Adelante had to do with what we experienced in Costa Rica when we were learning Spanish. And there was a couple down there, a Costa Rican family, who befriended us and took us under their wing. And we really felt like as we were down there, we were kind of convicted with, wow, I think this is how God wants us to treat people who come from other countries in our own city. So we moved into a home there near 18th and Central and KCK. The nearest grade school had demographics were about 80% Latino, and we were just loving on our neighbors, and they were loving on us, and we were beginning to start Mission Adelante. And what we've seen, if I talk about the story of the transformation of our community, it really has to do with what people from other places are doing and what they are bringing to the table. And it has been tremendous. We had a sense of we're moving into this neighborhood to serve, and the transformation that we've seen first begins in my own heart. The sense of what God has done as I have watched people overcome obstacles that I've never had to overcome, persevere through situations that I've never had to experience myself personally. And there's just a few people I could mention. We have there's really amazing people that I get to work with on my own team. Yanelis Lopez, she is a woman from Cuba. She's been in the U.S. for 2 years now. She started a ministry in Cuba, a discipling ministry, and she was doing some pretty innovative things for her context, and this ministry began to grow, and they were training people in over 20 different churches. And in Cuba, the context is much more difficult than it is here in a lot of ways, and they were doing some entrepreneurial training, some microlending, and the government in Cuba started taking notice of those things and started putting pressure on her. So she had to actually move to the U.S. to get away from some of that stuff. And now she's on our team, and she's leading our ministry community. She's our ministry director, and she's making a tremendous impact in our neighborhood, in our community. Laxmi Gurung is another one. She's 18 years old. She was born in a refugee camp, and her family moved to Kansas City, Kansas about 5 years ago, and she jumped in at age 13 and started learning English. She was introduced to Jesus through our kids program. And Laxmi is now serving as an apprentice on our staff, and she is leading this pilot program that we have for refugee kids now. And she is leading other kids who are learning about Jesus for the first time. But those are just some of the stories of people who, to me, have become heroes and have overcome things. But the story of our neighborhood goes beyond just what God is doing in the church context, but also includes what He's doing in the city through immigrant entrepreneurs, through people who are moving into our neighborhood and changing it in amazing ways. And I've seen this happen over the last 12 years. I've seen businesses that were boarded up now occupied by new businesses that have started by people who come from another country and who are trying to make it in the United States. When we first moved into our neighborhood, 18th Street and I-70 was kind of the gateway to our community. At that time, it was an abandoned truck stop and a raunchy motel. And we go into our community, and that's the welcome mat for our community in KCK. Well, about in 2008, during the height of the immigration boom in Kansas City, Kansas, our local grocery store teamed up with a developer and the unified government, and they transformed that truck stop, put in a new Sunfresh grocery store, built a new strip mall there, and businesses have opened up. And now if you drive into our neighborhood, it is a thriving business center. And what we've got happening really across our city is this transformation happening that is largely driven by immigrants and refugees. And it's difficult for me as I talk to you guys about this, politically in our country right now. There's a lot of things being said about immigrants and refugees, and I've been grieved by that. Over the past couple of years, I've been grieved by the things that have been said, and I've been thinking to myself, but that's not what I'm seeing in my neighborhood. The things I'm hearing are not true of what I'm seeing in our community as I see people from other places transforming our neighborhood. And as I'm getting to walk beside them, I'm seeing how they're underestimated or talked down upon, and I'm thinking, but these people are amazing. They're teaching me so much, and they're bringing up our community. And so I started doing some demographic studies of our neighborhood just to get a sense of what's really happening here, what's really going on from a demographic standpoint. And I went back and looked at the census data for Wyandotte County from 1980 to 2014, and there were some powerful things happening. Starting in about 1980, and during that period, Wyandotte County lost 56,000 white residents, a net loss, and that amounts to about 1/3 of the entire population of Wyandotte County. And if you think about what happens when you lose 1/3 of your population, you can imagine vacant homes. Like if every city block has 30 homes on it, now 10 of them are vacant. And that's not just in one part of the city, that would be the entire county. And so you get plummeting property values, you get loss of tax revenue, you get businesses closing, you get schools closing, and you get crime increasing when the economy turns down in that way. But when I think about it, and when I was saying, but that's not what happened in our neighborhood. And the question was why? Why was that not the fate of our neighborhood? Well, there was another thing happening at the same time during that same period. Starting about a decade later, about 1990, we started seeing an influx of immigrants from Latin America coming to our neighborhood and our county. During that same 34-year period, Wyandotte County gained 36,000 Latinos. Many of them, or most of them, immigrants. And so you have a sense of, you could say in a very real way that immigrants are a part of saving Wyandotte County economically. And so some people might say, well, what about the crime? And that's been a common narrative. What about crime and immigrants? And so I went to the Kansas Bureau of Investigation website and I did a little study, and from 2003 to 2015, crime in Wyandotte County dropped by 31%. And that was happening during the height of the influx of immigrants from Latin America and other places. I'm looking at this and going, this is what I see happening in my community. I see people from all places coming and transforming our neighborhood.
And maybe tell us a little bit about how you've seen local church partnerships and how in the midst of that, that's really started to help even clarify what your role is there in the city.
Yeah, gosh, we at Mission Adelante, I've just kind of come to see our role as being wind in the sails of people who are coming from other places. And Mission Adelante itself has a church community that is a part of our ministry. And so, we partner with our community in a lot of different ways. Churches from across the city come and partner with Mission Adelante to help teach English and help with our kids programs. But it's really become not just about churches from the outside coming in and doing the work, but it's become about our community owning what Mission Adelante is and inviting churches from across the city to partner with us in that.
Yeah, and maybe tell us too, there's this amazing institution that's now a part of this neighborhood called Delante Thrift. So could you tell us a little bit, you felt called to start this business. Tell us a little bit about the vision for Delante Thrift.
Yeah, we, about 2.5 years ago, we launched Delante Thrift, and we had a sense bubbling up that there are leaders being developed and emerging from within our community. We had been focusing on individual transformation for about 8 or 9 years at that point, and we said, gosh, can we be a part on a larger scale of community transformation? And so Delante Thrift was born really with a vision for kind of 3 main things that we wanted to see happen. We wanted to see some sustainable income. We thought, gosh, if we're going to think about things about how do we address medical and healthcare issues in our community, how do we kind of blow the wind in the sails of entrepreneurs from other countries, we need some sources of income that we currently don't have. So we started that, and I'll tell you what, starting a business is not an easy endeavor. We, at this point last year, we were making phone calls trying to raise more capital after we had lost a lot of money in 2015 and 2016. At this point this year, God has done an amazing thing. We're knocking on the door of having a profitable 2017. So sustainable funding was a piece of our vision. Job creation was another piece. We really wanted to provide an opportunity and an environment where we could give jobs to people from our own community and help them with job readiness, help them kind of engage. And so we employ 14 people at Delante Thrift, and most of them are from other countries. And for some of them, it's been their first job in the United States. And it's been an exciting piece of that. So then the last thing, we really wanted Delante Thrift to be almost a ministry center, a light in the neighborhood, a part of the revitalization of a portion of our community, and we've been seeing that happen. There's a quick story if I have time to tell it, but people come into our store and there's just a sense that Jesus is alive in our store. And we have an employee named Molly, and Molly befriended one of the customers who had cancer. And so this customer would come back in, and Molly was praying with this customer over a period of time as she was having her cancer treatment. Well, the customer had her doctor's appointment and found out that she was cancer-free. Where do you think she went first? She went to tell Molly at Delante Thrift. That was her first stop after finding that out.
Well, Jarrett, thank you so much for telling us a little bit about what God's doing at Mission Adelante and through Delante Thrift. And if kind of pointing back to what Tom said at the beginning, in the midst of a culture where there's this meaning morass, if we really believe, and long for the meaningful life, the most meaningful life is the one that sees that every life is meaningful. And when we come to understand that enriched by the gospel, we see new businesses start that create new jobs that impact people's lives and change whole communities. It's exciting to think about what will be in the next 10 years. And so, hey, JT, let's look a little bit about what you're doing there at Hope International. And that works with people across the globe, but you too have a neighborhood. And tell us a little bit about some of your work and how that local work focuses in a place.
Yeah. So as you've alluded to, Hope operates in many different countries. We're actually in 16 different countries in the globe. But one thing that's been really important to us is that every single one of our program flows out of the very concepts we've been talking about today. So our programs are deeply connected with the life of the local church, local leaders being developed in local church, with workers in their neighborhoods, with even culture that's embedded in people in place. And that's a strategic choice that we've made for a theological reason. And that is because we believe deeply that King Jesus came to be one who restores amongst people in place. Jesus isn't a redeemer only theoretically or spiritually, but he is bringing redemption in people and place. And so as we think about how to embody that, how to reflect that, it's been important that our programs are walking in the way of Jesus and what he modeled and his kingdom. And I think the centrality of that in our story also calls us, all of us, to be mindful of people and place in our own day. And in that regard, I think we find ourselves in a really unique moment in history. Two things make this a really unique moment. One, this huge wealth disparity. There's this huge wealth gap. People in the developing world know a level of material resources and wealth that was virtually unthinkable even a couple generations ago. And yet, today in the world, there are 2.5 billion people that wake up every single day into a wage of $2 or less a day. You move that wage to $2.50, about 50% of the world is waking up into that reality. $10, 80% of the world is waking up into that reality in terms of a daily wage. So there's this huge wealth disparity. But at the same time, and I think this is the real twist, the growth of the church right now is happening most rapidly in the global south. So there's this unbelievable growth, and it ties to all kinds of things from demographic shifts to church planting movements to persecution. Maybe it ties to some of these economic realities, huh? I mean, I'm not an economist or an analyst deeply, but the reality is the church growth is taking off. And so these two dynamics that are at play amongst people in place in our own day, they call us, I think, all of us, as the global body of Christ, to some really unique questions to wrestle with. On one hand, how do we see the church in the majority world truly empowered to be living out the mission of God? How are they given agency to be contributing and creating in this mission God's called them to? When they wake up into their neighborhood and the realities of their congregation, are they able to follow the commands of Scripture, to love their neighbor, to see the oppressed freed, to feed and clothe and shelter? And then at the same time, for the church here in the West, how are we alongside really honoring these brothers and sisters and also truly collaborating with them in ways that together place us in interdependence, in fellowship, right? But with trust in King Jesus, not in the American arm of the church as functional Messiah, but really, how are we together trusting Jesus to be doing this work amongst people in place? So these are the questions that drive us at Hope. These are the questions that propel us. Even as we're thinking about economic injustice, the questions of economic systems, how are we addressing those holistically in ways that point us back to Jesus and the redemption of all things? So yeah, I'm preaching. Sorry, y'all.
Well, preach on. Well, hey, when we think about understanding Scripture better, it should lead us to seeing better. And so I want you to tell us a little bit more about this, JT, as we come to understand Scripture and we understand this call to trust King Jesus functionally and what he's calling us to. What's kind of like the Google Street view perspective of the reality in which you're talking about? When we think about the majority world, which is really the majority of the church, when they put their feet on the ground in the morning, can you bring us into their lives, their economics, and their work?
Yeah. So today in the conversation, we've chatted quite a bit. We've had a lot of conversation around entrepreneurial efforts, around work even. And the reality is, in the majority world, there simply aren't enough jobs. So at the end of the day, if I was created in the image of God to work, to contribute, to create, if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to work, oftentimes I need to become self-employed. I need to create that work. And so and it's funny, it's not like the entrepreneurial bug is going around Africa, right? I mean, these are not entrepreneurs in the sense that we think of them often, but it's just that if you're going to work, you need to figure out a way to create a space to work. It's funny, I was actually prepping for a couple of workshop sessions that I'm going to be giving here in Kansas City, mid-November, we're hosting a Global Entrepreneurship Week. And I know this will be the 10th year that Kansas City's hosted this Global Entrepreneurship Week. And there are over 160 events happening that week. And as best as I can tell, the 2 workshops I'm giving are the only 2 that focus on entrepreneurs in the developing world. And the irony is that that's the vast majority of the workforce in the majority world. So the pastors, the workers, the ecosystem is very much tuned in to the entrepreneurial efforts that must happen for life, for flourishing, for survival. The challenge is that if you want to work, if you want to be entrepreneurial, you need some capital to start your work, to start your business. And that's true even amongst the most informal, small business ventures. So just like here, you need to either save or borrow to get that capital. But unlike here, in so many parts of the world, there just aren't the financial services available. And so usually what people have to do is choose between a couple really lousy options. One is often they'll work with a money lender, and probably the news is on the street. You guys know this is a very difficult scenario. When people begin to work with a money lender, often they enter into bondage for life, really slavery for life. Money lenders typically charge between 300 and 1,200% interest. So that's one option. The other option is to save. And interestingly, this might surprise you. I was kind of surprised when I first started really looking at the dynamics in the global world. Poor people would rather save money, actually. They'd rather save than borrow. But saving is really difficult for all kinds of reasons. First of all, there just are not physically places to put your money. It's really vulnerable. People are stashing it under mattresses. They're, some are burying it in the ground. Natural disasters, and even just kind of the fickle realities of their home and shelter often creates incredible vulnerability for them. Also vulnerable is the different kind of collective mindset that happens in these countries. There's a different way that people understand ownership and even the obligation we have to one another. And so people who are trying to save money, sometimes they struggle because they go to a gathering with family. They had $10 in their pocket, but now I heard about Aunt Mary's roof who got, that got blown off. And I'm obliged to respond. So because it's very difficult to save, often poor people will work with money collectors. And again, that might be a little bit of a new concept for some of you, but in every slum of the world, there are people who provide the service of coming on a regular basis, collecting some funding, and for a fee, they'll come on a regular basis and they'll safeguard this funding, this money, and then they'll return. They'll give the repayment. I wish I could tell you it was a modest fee. It's not. These money collectors charge between 70 and 80% interest. So, just think of the irony. The most vulnerable in our world, these pastors, these brothers and sisters that are trying to live in the image of God for what God's called them to, and here they are trying to save money. If they squirrel away $100 in a year, that collector comes back at the end of the year with $20 for them. So these are really difficult realities. The one thing that it does show us is that, what's true in America and what's true in every country in the world is that when something's valuable, people spend a lot of money on it, right? People spend money on what's valuable. And it's not that our brothers and sisters are making stupid choices. It's that getting access to this capital is so valuable. They need to put food on their table. They need to figure out some way to get tuition paid so my child has a different trajectory in life. So I think it's really illuminating to understand those realities.
And it can be a bit daunting when you start thinking about just the weight of these challenges. But you and I know, JT, that's not the end. That is not the end of the story. And we have a great opportunity. As Amy said, we are in the can chapter right now. And so I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how you've seen local churches kind of engaging these challenges and how you've seen specific economic opportunities and economic empowerment and how that's changed specific people and neighborhoods.
Yeah, that's great. And when I think about the way gospel transformation is playing out, I just want to name the fact that we are seeing that at Hope. We're seeing gospel transformation amongst all people, rich and poor, in the developing world and in the majority world. And I think it's so important to name that, because at the end of the day, we are all so needy of relationships restored to God's design. Whether that's relationships with one another or with our money or whatever. So just to say that. But you're asking about economic empowerment, and what I would say in that regard, what comes immediately to mind is some efforts that we've been involved with in Rwanda, some church-led saving programs that are about 10 years underway now. And I'm using that language, church-led, really intentionally. At Hope, we really think about our role much more like a bridesmaid, just kind of coming alongside. I liked your language too, what you were talking, I'm trying to remember what your word was, but basically coming alongside what God has called people to, his people to. And so when we think about that, it's really fun because we're actually coming alongside a program that's indigenous to the people in Rwanda, and actually to lots of different neighborhoods. This idea of coming together with saving groups to save and lend money to one another is not something the Western world brought. But actually, this was already underway, but with a little assistance, with a little interdependence in the family of God, we're watching the church in Rwanda, specifically the Anglican diocese, implement this and scale this in ways that are remarkable. Last year, this past year, we had over 250,000 people involved in savings programs. And our brothers and sisters, without a dime of outside capital, have saved well over $3 million in the past year. So it's just really remarkable. And the way it works, I've alluded to this group dynamic. The way it works is these men and women in the church, but they welcome people who are not church members to come and be part of these groups. In fact, in one place in the world, we have a group of imams that are saving groups. But anyway, these groups come together, and it's really simple. They come together to save together and lend their own money to one another. But in addition to the work of saving, they also come together and they spend time fellowshipping. They spend time in prayer. They spend time doing Bible study. And it's really important to name those other dimensions because, and this has been alluded to several times earlier in the program today, the fact is that poverty is not simply material, In 1990, the World Bank did a study with, they interviewed, I'm going to check my notes here, make sure I get it right. Yeah, they interviewed over 60,000 men and women from poor contexts in over 60 different countries. And they came to them and basically said, tell us what poverty's like. And what's fascinating is that when the researchers at the World Bank collated all the information, there was not a mention of material need within the first 5 responses. So the first 5 responses were people who were responding to this question, tell us what it's like to live in poverty. I feel invisible. I feel ashamed. I feel isolated. I can't drive to see other people. And even if I could, it's embarrassing. I don't have what I need. By the way, I do not think the implications of this are only playing out in the majority world, right? I'm sure you would agree with me. So when you think about what a church family has to offer in response to that, and why these saving groups are so transformational and so powerful. It's just remarkable to see the transformation that's happening. And in Rwanda specifically was such a difficult history. You guys know the difficult genocide history in that country. Even to see the way that people from different tribes are finding reconciliation. So the groups are absolutely transformative. It's whole life discipleship, right? That's what it is. That's what these saving groups are. They're whole life discipleship. One final story that comes to mind, I'll just leave you with, is a client who we work with on the microlending side of our work in Rwanda, a woman named Severa. We met Severa about 11 years ago. She was 30 years old, recently widowed, had 3 children, well, actually, not even in the home at the time. At the time, they actually didn't have a home to stay in. And Severa, 11 years ago, heard about Urwego, it's our bank in Rwanda, and through a series of events, came and met with a loan officer, received her first loan, equivalent $30 US, and used that loan to create a little peanut roasting business. She would go to the market and sell peanuts. And Severa came back. She repaid that loan. She came back for a second loan. She came back for the third loan. Time will not permit me to tell all of the loans that Severa took out, but today, Severa has taken out 14 loans with us. The last was the equivalent of $10,000 US. She has been incredibly industrious. She started a paint store, a hardware store. She started a welding company. She's rehabbed a home where missionaries from her church stay. Severa sells fruits and vegetables at market. So Severa is materially flourishing, right? And her family alongside. Beyond that, though, there are all the other dimensions of flourishing that we see playing out in Severa's life. Severa is employing over 50 people in her neighborhood, and anyone who owns a job knows that's not just 50 people, that's 50 families, that's 50 schools receiving tuition. That's just has amazing effects. Also, so I'll close with this. Her heart of generosity is remarkable. Severa has adopted 4 children in her neighborhood, pays school fees for some others. She pays health insurance for 15 people. Honestly, time will not permit me, but she's just a remarkable woman, truly living in the fullness of dignity, the image of God. And this is not a story about Microlending, Hope International, or even the Anglican Church in Rwanda standalone. This is the story of Jesus giving the uncommon grace of his presence and his redemption.
And what you're hearing, let's give a round of applause. There is so much opportunity and need within each of our communities, and I hope whether you're a pastor or a marketplace leader, this stirs your imagination. And if you are a pastor or a leader within your local church, we hope that also you learn more about Mission Adelante and Hope International as they are kind of bridesmaids alongside of the bride of Christ, unlocking the potential that each local church has as we seek to engage and care for our communities in which God has us. So if you want to know more, you can touch base with Jarrett or JT after this time here. And just thank you so much for this time together. Why don't we give them one more round of applause? Thank you.